Good evening, everybody. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my company, Inspiration Healthcare Group. I set up almost 20 years ago now with some friends. We're a healthcare company specialising in neonatal intensive care, but we also do wider intensive care products. And in some ways, the coronavirus is very relevant to us. But I'll explain a little bit about how that would interact as we go along. We're an award-winning medical company. We're very proud to have won a Queen's Award this year, or last year now, for international trade. That was 6 years of continual growth. When we started the company back in 2003, we were a distributor in the UK and Ireland. There were 4 founders, myself and three friends. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, Malcolm retired this year. There's only 3 of us left, but what I can say is that despite working with each other for over 20 years, but together in business for 16 years, we all actually have remained friends, which is perhaps a more important thing rather than just the business. We've always been cash generative, and we've had all but 1 year of growth. A couple of years ago, we were flat revenue, and our mantra always has been to reinvest from our own cash reserves. When we started the company, we had £20,000 of working capital, £5,000 each, plus an overdraft loan, if you like, from RBS for about another £25,000. And we bought products and sold them back to the NHS predominantly, and made some profit, reinvested that profit. And we, in the first 12 years as a private company, we used our overdraft in 11 months. We reversed onto the stock exchange in 2015 by acquiring a company with this rather nice product that you see on the right-hand side, and I'll explain a little bit about that as we go along. We've just done a trading update. Our turnover is £17.8 million this year. Previous year, 15.5 million. That's 15% growth year on year. On a like-for-like basis, we did acquire a small company last year. The growth was about 12%. We have a strong IP portfolio. We have 3 products ranges of ours are patented, and 1 imminently patented. Imminent, we expect to be patented in the next few weeks or months. We sell products to every NHS trust that has a neonatal intensive care unit. Neonatal intensive care units, there's about 200 of them in the UK at the moment. These are very highly specialist centres of excellence where premature babies as small as 300 or so grams can actually be to be looked after. And I don't know if anyone saw the BBC One show a week or so ago. They highlighted the UK's smallest ever baby, surviving baby at 305 grams. That baby was born. Really remarkable work the doctors and nurses do there. We also have diversified with our business, and we now export to around just over 50 countries through a distributor network of about 75 or so active distributors. When we came to the market, we were wanting to look at using the capital markets on the stock exchange and become a world leader in neonatal intensive care. We're targeting revenues of 100 million, and although that sounds quite a grand target, we've got 3 key strands to that growth. Continued organic growth, as you see, we're revenue generating, and we grow year by year up to 17.8 million so far this year, and we want to continue that organic growth by normal product development, market development activities, as you would expect an established company to do so. We want to invest in some disruptive technology. We've always been interested in selling disruptive technology, finding things that aren't actually the norm in medical practice, and taking them to the NHS and beyond into the wider world. And we've got a very novel product that I'm going to talk about a bit later, and hopefully that will help create a bit of a paradigm shift in our business. But also with the capital markets of the stock exchange, we want to acquire some small to medium-sized assets. We acquired a small company last year, and I'll explain that, that acquisition. But we're also targeting a few other companies in the space as well. Just a little bit about the management knowledge. We explained that I've been doing neonatal intensive care medical equipment from 1999, but before that, 1991. And throughout the whole company, my original partners, we met in a company selling neonatal intensive care equipment, and we've got that philosophy all the way through the company. Part of the benefits of having done this for a long time is the key opinion leaders, who are the professors of medicine now, were the junior doctors and early researchers when I first joined this industry. So we've kind of grown up with those doctors, and we've got a very good network of key opinion leaders around the world. When we look at the neonatal landscape, just to highlight some of the bigger players and some of the more illustrious names you may have seen, Draeger are a big German gas company, GE need no introduction, Philips again no introduction, Smiths are on the FTSE 100, Natus about 350 million market cap on NASDAQ, Atoma, the largest maternal company, mother and baby company in Japan, and Fisher & Paykel have a large healthcare division as well as their other interests. And I think when I look at all of those companies, none of them actually shout at me that they are a neonatal focused company. They all have products that are used in the neonatal intensive care unit that support the baby as it's going through a difficult start to life. But none of them are absolutely focused on that. And that's really what's driving us. We feel that if we can acquire and develop products in these various sectors that we don't have at the moment, we really can drive on and compete with these larger companies, and offering a much better portfolio and value proposition to the hospitals that look after these very small and sick children. Looking at the market opportunity, some numbers just to throw out at you. There's around about 150 million babies born every year around the world. Around 10% of those babies are born prematurely. That's before 37 weeks gestational age, and that number's actually rising. Preterm birth and the complications of preterm birth is the single largest killer of children under the age of 5 in the world today. The world's done great jobs of eradicating childhood diseases, but prematurity kills over approximately a million babies every year. The preterm birth rate is around about 10%. It does change depending on countries, but around about 10% is a good average. And the typical cost of a baby in a neonatal intensive care unit in the UK is around £1,500 per day. A baby born at 24 weeks gestational age could be in intensive care for 4, 6, 8 weeks or so. That would cost around £50,000. They would then go into a high dependency unit potentially, and that's relatively cheap at £900 a day, before they'll eventually go out into a postnatal ward at only a few £100s a day. That cost to society doesn't include other things like when the baby goes home, they end up having home oxygen, physiotherapy, they may have hearing impairments and motor disabilities, maybe blind or partially blind. They may need multiple surgeries. And as a friend of mine in the United States always calls them, these really are the million-dollar babies. What we would like to do is, as well as reduce that mortality figure, of course, that's a very important figure to reduce, but also improve the morbidity for these children. We don't want them to have lifetime disabilities, cerebral palsy and the like. And anything that we can do with the technology that we provide obviously will help reduce the mortality and give them a better life going forward. Some of the products that we have, and we've got two sort of subsectors that we currently are in at the moment. One is respiratory devices, and that's obviously helps breathing. And all of the devices we have in our respiratory range at the moment are disposable. the single use. These are our brands. We also sell other brands as a distributor still in the UK and Ireland, and we have some capital equipment. But just concentrating on our brand, we have a number of patented products here or going through patents. These products, typically the breathing circuits and the CPAP products down at the bottom of the slide, they're changed every week. So typically, a baby would have these until if they don't get better or don't get worse, they'll change them every week. The Inspire RPAP is a patented resuscitation device that will be used for about the first 10 minutes of life before they'll be put onto another respiratory support product. The market for respiratory support products is large, certainly large for us, 1.4 billion, expecting to grow to around 2.1 billion over the next 6 or 7 years. And one of the things that we've found, and I'll talk about in a bit more, is a disruptive technology called Project Wave that will fit in here, and we believe will actually change the way babies will be supported for their respiratory needs. The other subsector that we're in at the moment is patient temperature management. Obviously babies, especially premature babies, have a problem with maintaining their temperature. They need to be at 37 degrees. And we have various products that can actually help maintain that temperature. Interestingly though, the Techatherm Neo, although it will help babies stay at 37 degrees, its prime use is to actually cool babies. And we were privileged to work with Professor Azzopardi and a group from London on a major study back in 2003 when we first started that was looking at cooling babies these were term babies that had a perinatal asphyxia, so a lack of oxygen at the time of birth, maybe the cord round the neck, maybe shoulder presented first. The cascade of energy failure from those events can lead to severe cerebral palsy and death. And the hypothesis in that time was that if we cool babies down to between 33 and 34 degrees within 6 hours of birth, these babies might actually do well. Some of the cells will not die. We were privileged to work with the research group and supplied the equipment before anybody else was supplying that equipment. And in 2009, Dennis published his work in New England Journal of Medicine saying that the number needed to treat was 1 in 7 babies. So 1 in 7 babies would actually have a positive outcome and reduce the severity of cerebral palsy. That became a treatment adopted by NICE in 2010. And we sell around £3 million worth of Techatherms and their accessories to various countries around the world. Some of the highlights from the year I've already mentioned our growth and some of the other metrics. We haven't announced the full year, so the second half of those highlights are really about the first half. But it gives you a flavour that from being a distributor when we first started, now 45% of our revenue actually comes from products that we've either developed or we've licensed and control the IP for. Again, when we first started, all of our sales were in the UK and Ireland. Now, around about just over a third of our sales come from export, and that is a trend we wish to continue. We're starting to see traction for our new products as well, with 17% of revenue being from products that we'd launched in the previous 12 months. I'll talk about Biomedics and Bioholdings in a few minutes' time. We shipped a large order to Poland for our patient warming system, where we're now we've got a very large established base now in Poland for that particular product range. We've recently received a large order and shipped a large order to Sri Lanka for the Techatherm and its associated products, to actually which is now starting to be the standard of care in Sri Lanka for babies who have a difficult start to life. I've mentioned the Queen's Award, and the Cositherm at the bottom is our latest in our thermoregulating product portfolio, which we launched in October last year. One of the key projects that I wanted to talk about is Project Wave. Just as a real some real basic physiology and talk around why this is important. Premature babies just stop breathing. The brain isn't quite wired to actually be breathing normally like term babies do. And they have a condition called apnea of prematurity. It's a little bit like obstructive sleep apnea that some people, adults in later life, suffer from. But apnea really just means when a pause in breathing. They also need respiratory support. Some of these kids, they breathe okay, but they might be breathing very shallowly, or they might just have a very weak breathing reflex. And just to put things in context, as humans, we breathe, our tidal volume is around about 4 to 5 millilitres per kilo. So you can do the maths, and I'm probably, every time I breathe in and out, it's around about half a litre. But a premature baby weighing about half a kilo, the amount of gas, the amount of air they breathe in would be around 2 millilitres. That's 1 millilitre going into each lung. So to try and control that through ventilators is actually highly skilled from the engineers who designed them, and very difficult. So anything that we can do to actually help the baby breathing is obviously very important. There are 3 or 4 different things that medical science does. We can give the babies drugs. A drug like caffeine will certainly make them carry on breathing. It's a bit like having a can of Red Bull or a double espresso in the morning. They certainly won't stop breathing. They'll be wide awake for a while. That can actually cause, caffeine has some very good side effects, but any drug can have long-term neurodevelopmental complications. And so there are some benefits from caffeine, but obviously there may be other things and other drugs that we give babies that can cause damage. We can turn the pressures up on the ventilator, but as I've just said, a ventilator that's giving only a couple of millilitres, you don't want to keep turning up too much flow, too much pressure, because we'll blow the lungs apart and cause what's known as a pneumothorax. Very damaging to the child and very distressing for the nurses, doctors, parents, and obviously the patient. Or we can give an aggressive oxygen strategy, another drug effectively, which babies who suffer from a lack of oxygen, back in the day we thought give them more oxygen. Simple. But unfortunately that increase of oxygen actually can turn the child blind. It causes a condition called retinopathy of prematurity. And a very famous example of that was, is Stevie Wonder, the singer. He was born 6 weeks premature, and back in the day when Stevie Wonder was born, giving more oxygen at the time of birth was considered normal, and unfortunately Stevie Wonder was one of the people that went blind. So there's complications, but on the other hand, the current practice keeps children alive, keeps these babies alive. But we've found a device or a technology from a university in California that is a non-invasive, non-pharmaceutical way of actually stimulating the baby. And we've had lots of conversations with the professor about the difference between stimulating the baby and allowing them to sleep, rather than causing too much arousal and waking the baby up. And for those of you who want to discuss stimulation versus arousal, I'll do that over a glass of wine later. But one thing we want to do is make sure these babies sleep normally and grow properly. So this device actually taps into something called the vagus nerve and actually just encourages the baby to carry on breathing normally. It's been trialled under a very small trial in California. We've got about 15, 16 babies, and we've seen a very, very interesting trend, and we've licensed that technology, and we're working through that in our R&D portfolio at the moment. We believe that 1.5 million babies a year will benefit from that type of technology. We think that it'll have at least a $40 per baby value, if not more. And we're currently doing the paperwork to try and to be in clinical trials later this year in the UK. We're only looking at a relatively small trial. Medical device trials aren't quite the same as drug trials. We're looking at something in the order of £100,000 or so to run the trial before we can CE mark the device. Very quickly talk about Viomedics. We acquired the company. They're a small manufacturer based down in East Sussex. We acquired them for £4 million on a cash-free, debt-free basis. £3 million of that was cash, £1 million consideration shares. they're actually a strategic supplier to us already. So one of the things we've done is actually brought in-house the manufacturing, brought in that capability, and we retain some of the manufacturer's margins on the products that they were making for us. They'd also got a new design of a CPAP system for premature babies, and you can see that on the right-hand side. That's actually being looked at the moment through the UK Patent Office, and we're hearing good noises from the Patent Office on that system. So they've also got some other products that broaden our portfolio and allow us to leverage the CPAP systems, the RPAP, and the other products as I mentioned earlier around the world through our distribution network. So in summary, we want to become a global leader in neonatal intensive care. It's an attractive market, relatively large market for us, and we believe that we can target £100 million of revenue over the medium term. We want to do that carrying on going forward with organically growing our core business, our current business as we've been doing. Developing novel technology like Project Wave to be disruptive in the marketplace and do something that's completely different to what's out there at the moment, and to acquire further companies, small to medium-sized companies and technologies like Biomedics that we did at the back end of last year. Couple of take-home messages. We're a cash-generative company. We've always managed our cash well. We spend the cash that we generate on our own internal R&D. So we're a cash-generative medical device company. We've never raised money apart from in September last year to acquire Biomedics, and we've therefore funded all of our own growth to this point through our own reinvestment of profits. We've got a strong IP portfolio, products that are patented, and we can use those around the world, and a very strong market knowledge as management have been doing this for a long time. Our cash position at the end of July last year, at the end of July last year, was 31st of January was 2.6 million. We raised money, and we were offered 4.6 million for the acquisition of Biomedics. We took 4.2 million or so because of the impact Brexit we thought may have with our business, which didn't transpire to be the case. So we've taken a little bit of extra cash, and obviously as we've had a very good second half, we've actually added to that cash position, and we'll be disclosing that when we make our full year announcements of results towards the end of April. The acquisition of Biomedics has given us more products and greater capacity as we go towards that journey of becoming a global leader. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Neil. Thank you. Any questions from the floor, please? Gentleman over there, please, Peter.
You mentioned at the beginning of your presentation the coronavirus outbreak could provide opportunities. Can you give some information about that?
Yeah, obviously it's a respiratory disease and we supply respiratory products. We're also a distributor of respiratory products in the UK and Ireland. And although some of our products are not directly used because they're for premature babies, we are starting to see the Department of Health and Social Care freeing up monies as the budget was announced today for products for fighting coronavirus. Although they're not our own branded products, they're distributed products, we are able to get those from around the world. And we've been talking to the Department of Health this afternoon actually about what we can do and what products we can supply. We're also talking with a number of other companies. I mean, we're not the only company at the table. There's a very wide industry reaction to this, and the Department of Health are asking all companies that can supply respiratory support products of what's available in the supply chain, what we can do. And we've been talking to them at the moment about what we can do through our partners. Hopefully, from our company point of view, we will get some of those orders, but hopefully, obviously, the equipment we supply from a society point of view will be unnecessary. But we are talking to them at the moment, and there is significant monies available for respiratory products in the event of COVID-19 getting worse.
Thank you. Any other questions, please? Gentleman over there, please, Peter.
Can I just ask you what percentage of your turnover is related to Europe, non-UK? And also, what share percentage you and your founders have of the business, and whether or not you see any likelihood of paying dividends going forward?
Yeah. We classify the UK and Ireland as our domestic market. So anything south of the Channel and the North Sea is Europe to us. And that's around about 23%, 24%. Ireland is probably would add a couple more percent on top of that. So probably about a quarter of our revenue comes from the EU. If that answers the first question. What was the second one? My personal shareholding?
You and your founders, how much of the business do you have?
I hold 11.8% of the business. Toby, who sits on our main board, holds about 10.5%, I believe. Simon, the third partner who's still in the business, holds about 11.5%. Malcolm, who retired, is about 6% or so. So from the original founders, we're still around about 40% of the business, if my math's right. Going forward for a dividend, I believe that companies that have established that generate cash and generate profit should be paying a dividend. And although we want to be a growth company, so we need to make sure that we balance any dividend payment to, so we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. We don't want to raise money just to pay it off in a dividend. But we are looking to pay a dividend sometime next year. So our financial year ending in January 2021, we would look to see if we can pay a small dividend from the profits made next year, or this year, but paying it next year. But it's obviously got to be manageable, have the right level of cover. But I think that a company that's best part of 20 years old should be paying a dividend.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the floor? This gentleman here.
Question about R&D. I mean, I think at the moment you invest about 5 to 6% of your turnover in R&D. How do you see that going forward, and also how many people or resources are involved in that R&D effort?
Yeah, certainly we'd like to continue that going forward of 5-6% of our turnover reinvesting in R&D. That would certainly, in my mind, for a medical device company would be probably slightly at the lower end that we would like to do, but certainly affordable without raising money just to pay for R&D. Currently we have a team of about 6 or 7 engineers and scientists. We have a regulatory team as well, and quality team that sit outside of our pure R&D team, that obviously contribute to R&D projects in terms of making sure that what we're doing will be compliant and can be registered. So that the whole team is slightly bigger than just the people that call themselves design and development engineers. The one thing for medical device companies, I suppose like most companies, is that we need software, hardware, firmware, as well as mechanical, physical products. So there's materials and expertise in various different categories. So we outsource quite a bit of that. So we only have one electronics engineer in the company at the moment, but we outsource the electronics and software element, but manage that from in-house. The split, from an accounting point of view, we capitalise external R&D costs, but staff R&D costs are written to the P&L, if that helps.
Thank you. So Neil, is there a liquidity problem as such when you talk about the current? When you talk about the current share register with the company, is there a liquidity problem?
I think there's a liquidity problem for most small companies on AIM. It's difficult for companies like ourselves to actually become visible, and if you try and buy shares and there aren't any straight away, you move on to the next one. You may not come back. So I think that's perhaps a structural problem for AIM with small companies, rather than just because of the free float. Yeah. And of course, there's a trade-off then between needing institutional investors to write larger checks for acquisitions, but institutions also hold the shares. And so even though perhaps there's 40% held in management, You could argue that 60% free float that's not held within management, but companies, the institutions tend to want to hold their shares and be long-term supporters. One thing we would like to do is some sort of transformational transaction, something that gives us scale to get towards a sort of a 50 million market cap rather than the 25 million market cap that we're at the moment. Because if we get to that stage, then we can issue more shares. There will be more liquidity naturally because we'll be a bigger company.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much, Neil. Any other questions before we finish? I think that's it then, Neil. Thank you very much.
Thank you.